back to our gavel-to-gavel coverage of the George Zimmerman trial. Judge Deborah Nelson just coming up and saying that they are going to break for lunch. A little break in the action right now. They will be back. Attorneys will be back to continue to look through those questions that they have there on their tables there. They'll be back at 1:30, so we'll have more from there. However, you guys have been very busy asking a lot of questions about this jury selection process, about what this all means and exactly how are they going to get to that magical 6 number who will serve on the jury to decide if George Zimmerman is indeed guilty or not guilty of second-degree murder. Let's bring in News 13's Christine Webb, who is standing by. She is monitoring our online chat. We also have NeJame, our legal analyst. We'll hear from him in just a second. Let's start with you, Christine. I see a lot of great questions in there. I saw one question about payment for jurors there. I do know the answer to that. It's actually $15. $15 for the first 3 days.
You helped
if
out,
you are
Kelly.
not working. $30 for any day thereafter. So they've got a lot of questions, a lot of legal beagles in there.
They really do, Kelly. As we've seen, our chat has certainly been busy right here at cfnews13.com/chat. Many of you commenting about this case. Also, like Kelly said, asking some really great questions. Let's bring in our legal analyst, NeJame. Mark, we did have a bunch of questions about jury duty, how much people are paid, and actually surprised at how low that payment is.
It's always been that way, and I'm aging myself, but I remember when it was $6, so it's never been commensurate what true incomes are. It's deemed to be more of a public service and a social commitment, a civic commitment. So you're never going to get somebody getting a proper day wage for this.
Had a question in the chat. What will happen if they can't find an unbiased jury? What does happen?
Well, we've never had that situation, so we'll likely, though, go out of town. I mean, there are times when there's going to be so much pretrial publicity that you can't pick a jury, so that's why you ask for a change of venue. Here, the judge seems to think that we will be able to find one, and she's likely right, but let's say that your situation, your hypothetical situation comes true. Well, first of all, we're going to probably be a few weeks away with 500 potential jurors, and let's say that any reasonable percentage of them are knocked off for cause, and it's a half an hour per juror. You're still talking a handful of weeks just to get through this 500. If they can't do it by then, they could always bring in more, or they could make a request for a change of venue saying that they're simply stopped here, they can't go any further. So they would go to another county, much like Judge Perry had us do. He pulled the jury from another county in the Casey Anthony case, or you can just pick up the whole cat and caboodle and move elsewhere, but it doesn't look like that's going on. Nobody's made the request, so they're going to keep it here as best as they're able to.
Mark, I want to get your take on one person's question who has been really trying to get this question answered, so need your help. PMAC wrote in saying, I'm a retired South Florida cop. I know each side gets preemptive jury strikes. Down south, a lawyer could not strike a black juror without first making a case to the judge that the strike was race neutral. Is that the case here as well?
Yes, that's not just a law down in South Florida. The former officer was obviously sitting on a jury who had familiarity with the court system. And I alluded to that earlier. Yes, you're not allowed to simply strike because of color. So, but it does happen. And so what the lawyers attempt to do is that they attempt to create other reasons for the strike and showing that this is to be a race-neutral panel and a race-neutral jury. But you could not find a defense lawyer in the land who would say that they would want this jury to be predominantly African-American, particularly African-Americans from Sanford, because of the history of racial unrest, because of the history of accusations about an indifferent police department over the years in the past, and some would say until recently. Then you've got a situation where that is going to be a factor, but they're not allowed to really talk about it or to admit to it. And I think that you see with the police chief who resigned in Sanford, you had a lot of high hopes for him, and a lot of people think that he was really a sacrificial lamb who got thrown under the bus on this. And it's because of the issues of race. I just had being published on CNN.com today, and I titled it, "The Race is On," simply because race is a factor, and anybody who thinks that it's not been, as it relates to this entire case, is simply, they have their head in the sand. It is a factor. But it's one of those sadly ugly things that can't be outwardly talked about in the course of the case, but it does exist.
Certainly seeing how passionate people are on the chat today. News 13 legal analyst Mark NeJame, we appreciate
Thank you.
your expertise.